Good morning, everyone. The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Ag and Rural Development and Natural Resources will come to order. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Representative Brixey.
Here.
Representative Martis. Representative Pori. Representative McKinney.
Here.
Representative Mincer.
Here.
Representative Borton.
Here.
Representative Alexander.
Here.
Madam Chair, 5 members are present. A quorum of the subcommittee is present.
All righty. Representative McKinney moves to adopt the minutes from the prior meeting. There being no objection, the motion prevails. So the reason that we're getting going, we know that some of our colleagues are having a challenge in traffic this morning, and the reason we're going to get going is that one of our presenters is on a timeline. And so we are going to have a presentation this morning from the Michigan History Center Director, Sandra Clark, and Stacy Tchorzynski, manager of the Archeology section at the Michigan History Center, discussing the funding that we approved last year for the cultural resource management. Would you guys like to come up and introduce yourself and bring us your presentation?
Thank you, and good morning. We are delighted to be with you this morning. Our thank you comes from the heart for your past support, as well as the opportunity to share a little bit with you about what we're doing with all that money you so generously appropriated for us. We are part of the DNR, and if you read through the mission statement, you will see that the DNR is responsible for natural and cultural resources, and the Michigan History Center, we're the cultural resources part of DNR.
The staff slide was too.
Oh, and I missed one. Thank you, Stacy. I thought so. It wasn't what I expected. So this is now the staff of the archaeology section. Stacy and Wayne have been with us for quite a while. Wayne is our maritime archaeologist who was doing a quarter maritime and 3/4 other DNR things, now doing pretty close to full-time maritime. And then our three new members, 2 of whom, Jeff Chivas and Luke Pickren, are with us today. As I said, we're the cultural side. But that means we work with all of DNR, and I know you all are familiar with DNR, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but you'll see that this is all DNR that we work with. The only one that is not a land manager in one way or another is obviously Law Enforcement Division, but they're the people that help us enforce things like the underwater preserve legislation. We do all kinds of things with these departments. Part of this is the Section 106, the National Historic Preservation Act, helping them prepare submissions for that. But even more important is really working with them on land management policies, getting a head start when we're cutting trees in the forest. We review where they're going to cut, not only for the cutting of the trees, but what they're going to have to bring in big machinery to be sure they're not going to damage cultural resources. We assist with public and tribal consultation when we're doing this. We do training in these departments, outreach and education, and we do collections management because part of archaeology is obviously the research and the figuring out what's there, and in doing that, we do end up with a lot of collections, and we have an obligation to take care of those. Well, Stacy, I'm getting 2 at a time. Let's try no. I'm going to give you an example of one of the things that we do, because I think it makes it a little bit more clear of what this is all about. Every year, the National Guard, the Army National Guard, does readiness work with their training with the state parks. And they pick projects that they come out and they do the labor to make the projects happen. we have to look at those and see if there's any potential for damage to cultural resources. One of them for this year is at Wilderness State Park up at the tip of the Lower Peninsula on the Mackinac Straits. When we're looking for things, we see if there's any archaeology done before, but we also see if there's likely to be cultural things. And in a bluff overlooking the Straits of Mackinac, there is some likelihood that there might be cultural things. So at that point, our staff, this is what we call a small project, something that our staff can handle as opposed to contracting for. They go out and do shovel tests. And in this particular site, they found quite a bit of fire-cracked rock, which says that there were people here. But they also found this. This is called a Durst point. You would probably call it an arrowhead if you grew up like I did in naming things. The people that made this, used it, and held it, lived in our state 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. This is a touch point for them. Most of these points are found in Wisconsin, but not surprising that we would find a few, and where we would find them is on the northern Great Lakes. I find it fascinating that why were they there? They were hunting and fishing. Why are many people there today? They're hunting and fishing. Our connections are strong and go back a very long ways. If you look at the picture, you'll also see a trowel sticking out of the dirt. That's the level at which this precious point was found. It's not very deep. And that's why it's so important that we do archaeology, even if it's a simple project. In this case, this particular building is not accessible. It's a historic building built by the CCC during the Great Depression, probably. We know during the Great Depression, we think it was CCC, it might have been Public Works Administration as well, but it's not accessible. So the project is to make it accessible. That means building a parking lot, building a ramp. And because of what we found, the parking lot will be in a different place on land that is disturbed and not likely to have cultural things of significance. And the ramp will be protected so it is above ground, doesn't put pressure on the site, doesn't do damage to the site. That's why we do this work. And it is sometimes all you find is fire-cracked rock. Sometimes you find nothing. But sometimes you find something that really tells us about a connection of the people that came before us and helps to document those connections. We also do underwater archaeology. I mentioned that that's Wayne's thing. Another 38,000 square miles of land to cover, all around our state in the Great Lakes. 1,500 shipwrecks that have been reported. We have not verified all of them. But we have had in this state underwater preserves since, I have to think back now, I'm a historian and I can't remember my own history some days, late 1970s. This is the first time that we have had a person in Michigan dedicated to helping those voluntary groups that run those underwater preserves, that actually also will continue to work with Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, but be able to really help with that very important, almost like frozen in time places when those ships go down and what we can learn. Most of the things that Wayne works with are ships, but we also work with planes. We don't think of planes going down in the Great Lakes, but the Tuskegee Airmen were training at Selfridge Air Force Base during World War II. Lieutenant Moody's plane went down just off of Port Huron at the northern tip of Lake St. Clair. It's been found. We've been working with the National Museum of Tuskegee Airmen in Detroit to document that airplane, do the history research, but also document what's on the ground. And we are bringing up parts of it, preserving it, and those will eventually be part of the museum exhibit. So a really important project that our team is involved with. Obviously, this point and a whole lot of things say that we are very involved with the tribes. And we have been involved with the tribes for a long time. Sanilac petroglyphs is one of our historic sites. And I think we were one of the first state park systems history people in the nation to have a co-management agreement for one of our sites. And that's what we have at Sanilac petroglyphs. Everything we do together, because this is a sacred site. This is particularly important to the Saginaw Chippewa. They are our partners in administrating the site now. And we have learned so much. When I started my job, which I'm not going to tell you how long ago it was, but we called this the hunter. Now we call it the archer. And in our tribal knowledge, he's not hunting, he's shooting knowledge forward to the future generations. And that's what this rock is about. And that's the kind of things that we benefit from and learn from our work with the tribes. We consult, obviously. We issue the permits for archaeology on state lands. And that means that we consult with all of Michigan's tribes and sometimes some of Wisconsin's tribes on anything that we issue before we issue it. The second picture here is a little bit deeper consultation, if you will, at Strait State Park, where we are building a new learning center and working with the tribes on the interpretation throughout the park. It's a Father Marquette National Memorial. We want to add the context of the culture that Father Marquette was living with and entering into at this park going forward. And here you see both our staff and tribal archaeologists working together on the site for the Learning Center. We found nothing. That's good. So we didn't have to move the site. But that's a very deep working together. Our expansion this year was very fortuitous, because in the third picture here you see repatriation under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. This is in the 1990s when this act started. We were really focused on human remains. But last year the act was updated, it was expanded, and now it also focuses on grave goods and cultural patrimony. That means we have to go through our collections and go through the process again. This is a big lift. It requires consultation. Before we do anything with things, it requires responding to tribes who wish to have things repatriated. We are fully supportive of this act, and we are glad to be working with the tribes on it. But as I said, it is going to take a fair amount of time. It's also very important under this act, they have also the requirement of taking good care of the collections. We're going to learn some things about how different tribes want us to take care of things that they don't want repatriated but want treated appropriately. But we also have work to do to take care of all of Michigan's archaeology collections, and that's one of our big focuses right now. They are in a secure place, but the furnishings and things were put in place in 1989 when our building opened, and we can do much better on the storage of our archaeological objects. So part of what we will be doing is buying compact shelving, better storage, working through those collections both with NAGPRA in mind and with their long-term preservation in mind. And of course, we like sharing this. That's part of what we do. Michigan History Center's mission is focused on outreach, telling Michigan stories, telling as many of Michigan's stories as we possibly can. In archaeology, our signature event every fall is Archeology Day. I really wanted to bring one of the things in and teach you how to throw an atlatl, although I'd be a bad teacher. I actually was trying to throw one beside this, not very far from this young man. I think mine is the one that you see in front, because this little couldn't have been taller than this. Listened to the directions, picked it up, and his is the one that is sailing the great distance. I think he's going to be a baseball pitcher or something when he grows up. But it's just it's a way that we get kids involved, whether it's making pottery, whether it's hands-on exhibits. Archaeology is a wonderful subject in that we have things to touch, and Archaeology Day in the fall is one of those times when we do that. We also go out to schools. We also now will have the staff capability to do more with archaeology with the 45 to 50,000 kids that visit the museum in Lansing every year. So this is very important, as well as programs that we do for adults in sharing archaeology. I want to give you a little, this is where we are today, our current plan in terms of operations and research. Doing a lot of education, and we'll be developing materials for all of those DNR folks that we need to work with, so they understand how important it is to start with us, not call us in the middle. That way we don't delay projects. We help them move forward more quickly. I've already talked about collections care and the NAGPRA compliance. That is going to be a big part of our work as this year in particular. We've done the first step, but that was a update on what we reported in the 1990s. Now we have to go back and look at all of our collections and see if there are potentials there for cultural patrimony in particular, as well as grave goods. We have ground-penetrating radar, which we will get trained on, which makes a big difference, again, particularly with these Native American sites. It means that without putting a shovel in the ground, we can see if there's something there that we ought to be concerned about and maybe going further with. We have the equipment. DNR bought that last year. Now we need to get our staff trained and start using it. And then a lot of our work is obviously in-house and contracted archaeological surveys. We have been, up until this year, we've been very much in the responsive mode. DNR is going to build a trail. We got to look at it right now and see if there's any problems. We know there are areas that we need to know what's there, and this is going to give us the opportunity to start looking at some of those areas, finding the details so that we know in advance where the cultural resources are and can really take a better care of them. Our staff will be going out on what we call small projects. That's 2-3 days. They can get the work done. Things that are going to take a few weeks will be contracted. We've got a list here of our priorities, where they are, their trails, their forests, their habitat management projects, and the last thing, whatever else needs doing quickly, because there is always something that comes up, either unexpected discoveries that we have to go out and take care of immediately, or a project that somebody didn't realize that they were supposed to check before they did it. And we hope that 5 years from now there's not going to be any of those in DNR, but it's going to happen. So that's kind of what our staff will be doing this year. And in terms of outreach and education, our agency also is the Michigan History Museum. So we're in 12 sites across the state. We will have new archaeology exhibits at Fort Wilkins and Fayette this year that the staff will be helping us with. Michigan Archeology Day is October 5th. It's a Saturday. If you have children or grandchildren, bring them with you and come see us. And we hope to make some progress nominating some of the more significant sites that we know of to the National Register of Historic Places. The Nonesuch Mine and Porcupine Mountains, the Sally and Hanson Lumber Camp at Harwick Pine State Park that I think you've heard about a little bit before. And then we think that Fayette Historic State Park should be a National Historic Landmark. It's an incredible survival of Michigan's mining industry, but we also know that on a little curly tip in front of the superintendent's house, it was a Native American site as well. And there are other evidences of Native Americans, so the long stretch of Michigan history is at that park, and it is really an amazing survivor. This is at Fayette. They had to put in some new utilities, so this is shovel testing for where they're putting the utilities. You will note that we do let others play with us when we are in the field. I can say I have done it once at Fayette. I got dirtier than I've been since I was 3 years old, I think. But the wind changes at Fayette and blows dirt in your face a lot. But if it's something you're interested in, we would be happy to let you know when we are going to be in the field. And if we're in your area, we would welcome people. As you can see, these are some of the folks at the park helping us sift the dirt to see if there's anything there. With that, I will say thank you again. You have made a huge change for Michigan and its cultural resources. We greatly appreciate it, and ask you if you have questions for us.
We do have a few questions. Rep. Mentzer?
I would be very happy to vote for all of the money that you're asking for, only because of the underwater archaeology. I happen to be a certified diver. I'm a PADI master diver. I have dove the Sanilac Preserve multiple times. I dove the Mary Alice B, the Sport, and a couple others. I haven't made it up into Thunder Bay yet, but I have also drift dove on the St. Clair River multiple times. And the fun thing is, in the St. Clair River, you know, that town caught fire, and they bulldozed it all into the river. And so when you're drifting along, you can still find bottles from the apothecary. You can still find pieces of leather and shoe from the shoe store, or cobblers, and you can find other artifacts as you go down the river. So, and plus we know that right now in St. Clair Shores that they found a underwater, community that's now, taking shape. Jerry Santoro from the Macomb County Department of Planning and Economic Development, I call him the water boy, because he's the one who's excavating, researching all of that. So I just want to express my appreciation for the fact that you have an underwater archaeologist now, because I found some pretty cool things up in the Lachino Islands also. That's not, that's still native land right there. So everything you want, I'm good.
Thank you, and that's wonderful to know. We'll let you know when they're doing the Tuskegee stuff, too. That sounds like that's right up your alley. So. I would enjoy that. Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Representative Vice Chair Borton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Director Clark. Appreciate your presentation today. It's good to have you here. I've got a question for you. I'm looking at the budget, the governor's executive budget recommendation, and I see she's proposing cutting funding for the Michigan Historical Center by $1.9 million, and also eliminating 14.5 FTE positions. And then I see through Executive Order 2023-6, she wants to transfer the Archives of Michigan from the DNR to DTMB. Just wondered how you feel about that and how that's going to affect you.
It's a hard question for me to answer because I do work for the governor direct in a sense. I'm very sad about that. We are doing our best to see that it affects our service to the public and our work together as minimally as possible. I will say that DTMB has leaned over backwards. We do have a memorandum of agreement that we will continue to cooperate in all the many things that we do together. Obviously, when we're working with various communities, they have, and helping them with their history. Some of it is museum things, some of it is archives things. They are not leaving our building. We're on the same floor. We see each other every day, and so we do continue to work very closely together. But it's been kind of a tough thing. Personally, I will be the first to admit.
Okay, thank you.
Your presentation today. I'm very supportive of the work you're doing. Michigan does have a rich history. I was flipping through some of the slides that I missed, and I don't know if this was covered or not, so my apologies if it was. But I guess what is the plan to attract some of our youth and our children into this space and develop an interest amongst future generations?
Part of that is the Archeology Day that we do, but we do at the Michigan History Center see about 45,000 kids every summer or every school year coming in school groups and adding more archaeology there. I know that Stacy has been out to schools at some of their things. We haven't gotten this going with this group yet because we're still scrambling a little bit, but we also do internship programs. We believe at the History Center that you should pay your interns, but in the museum field, we have we have a good crew of interns. We're finding good partners for this as well. U of M is providing 2 interns every summer now, paid interns that they are paying for us to work on the Underground Railroad in Michigan, and nominations to the National Network to Freedom. We are also working with MSU on, we will have 2 Latinx students this summer working with us for the first time. And those are paid interns that we are paying. But so we are trying not only to get more people interested in, but to make sure that we're helping expand all the stories that we are telling as we are bringing interns in. It's really important that we get people, very diverse people. I think we had 4 last year. We try to get them 1 day a week that they're all there so that we can bring them over to the Capitol one day and make it a good experience that they're learning from each other and working with each other as well.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Rep. Martis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies for my voice. I feel better than I sound. Talking about finding arrowheads 3,000 years ago, looking at our more recent history in Michigan. Michigan history is fascinating. My grandfather taught it for over 44 years. You alluded to with the arrowhead story, the fact that there may be other areas where you're not going to find history that old in in the country. And I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about what makes Michigan history unique and maybe what we're able to discover and uncover in Michigan that is really different than the rest of the region or the rest of the country.
I'm going to let Stacy talk on that.
That is an excellent question. From everything, by virtue of the glacial history of the state, our geology, our water bodies, the uniqueness of our peninsulas have attracted people, Anishinaabe people particularly, and their ancestors for millennia. People have lived in Michigan for upwards of 14,000 years, and when you talk to tribes, they will tell you since time immemorial. And the things that have attracted people over that long river of time is a lot of what we love about where we live today. It's the water, it's the animals, it's the resources, and it's a good relationship with all of those things. So I think we, are blessed to live in an exceptionally unique environmental landscape, and that has been the case for several generations. So I think there's a lot more that we don't know yet. There's a lot more to be found.
I think something else, building on what Stacy said, the native people, the Anishinaabe who live here, this is their homeland. They weren't removed to Oklahoma. And that means that we have all of their knowledge kind of at our fingertips. And we've not celebrated it like we should. We haven't learned from it like we should. And we've just had, a friend of mine used to say, exceptional people in an extraordinary environment, as Stacy has said. We do have a pretty unique history and an incredible amount of diverse experiences. And I think it is, I have been at this job for a very long time, and I have a hard time leaving it because every year I learn something new.
Members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate you both coming and helping educate us about the department and the work that you all are doing there. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again for your support. It's making a real change. We appreciate it.
Okay, so I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and notice that we have a group of fine young leaders that have come into the room to observe from 4-H and maybe FFA. Is there a leader in of the group of students that came in? Okay, you're wearing a tie and a blue jacket. You're looking away. Come up to the podium and introduce yourself and just tell us why you're here today. Sorry to put you on the spot. Trust me, this is going to help you later in life somehow.
We're
First, say your name.
I'm Daniel McKee. I'm from Berrien County, and with me, I have a bunch of youth from all over the state that were in 4-H. And this weekend is all about capital experience and figuring out and writing bills and doing mock scenarios and finding issues within certain topics of our state.
Thank you so much for coming, and we hope you have a positive experience. It's important, I think, for people to understand, young people to understand how our government works. And sometimes it seems like what we do is really boring, but for serial nerds like all of us up here, it is really important, and we're delighted that you're here to observe. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, Rep. Menser wants to interrogate you.
No, welcome. I think it's so cool.
Thank you.
And if you look way back in the back, we have a representative of the Michigan Farm Bureau. Raise your hand. You guys need
Several.
to talk to him. He's going to give you some wonderful, absolutely great information.
And so is Rebecca. We have two representatives here from Farm Bureau.
Great.
So they can answer any question you have.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have another presentation. Today we are going to hear from John Yellich, who's the director of the Michigan Geological Survey, and he's going to talk about the funds we appropriated last year for the aggregate mapping. Mr. Yellich, you want to come up and bring your props and introduce yourself? Do you need anyone to help you with your props? We love props. Okay. He can come and sit up with you and hold that up in the air. It would be wonderful. Here we go. Okay.
Thank you. I'm John Yellich, Director of the Michigan Geologic Survey at Western Michigan University. I've had this position since 2013, and that was 2 years after the survey was transferred from the state of Michigan, DEQD at the time, to Western Michigan. And so I've been in that position since that time.
Mr. Yellich, can you tell us who your prop holder is?
Yes.
For the record.
I'm Peter Rose, geologist with the Michigan DNR.
So we've been working hand in glove with the DNR for the 10 years that I've been here. And so really appreciate the opportunity. Also, thank you for the funding that was provided to us for the program we're going to talk about, which is the aggregate mapping. Very quickly, I will say is that thank you also for the support for the annual funding for the geologic survey, because it was 30 years that there was no funding for the survey, and so it was relatively inactive in that time. And since that time, we are now active and doing a lot of the mapping and other things that need to be done over the last years, and I'm just going to go through some of that very quickly here. So what I'd like to do is that a lot of things that we do is we want to make it so that it's visually usable by everybody, and this is just a 3D depiction of the lower peninsula of Michigan, and a lot of people are enthused about this, but also we want to have students and other people become enthusiastic about geology as well. Yesterday I was with 28 undergrad students at the University of Michigan. I was invited to come and talk about careers in geology, and so this is something that's really exciting, very exciting to be there. So anyway, with that, if we just kind of run through the agreement that we had, was signed on November 13th, and so we've had update meetings with the DNR every 5 to 6 weeks, kind of let them know what's going on. We've posted positions for the aggregate mapping that we're doing. We have 6 FTE positions that we're looking at. These, of course, are assigned directly to this project that we're going to be doing. So we have an organization chart I'm going to show you, but we have reviewed and identified the current databases that reside right now throughout the state. And a lot of them are state databases, but some of them, many of them, are local. They can be county or township databases that we're talking about, looking for aggregate resources, and so that's one of the things that we're doing. Our goal is to compile a summary of the databases and make open files so that everything that we have would be open file for everybody to have, and that's the role of the survey. Our objective is to prepare maps with data and formats for everybody to use, and that means not just geologists and engineers, but also citizens, so that they can understand what we're doing. Aggregate maps are the precursor to our county mapping products, and so everything that I'm going to be showing you now is the precursor to our geologic maps that we're doing. Also having public meetings. We believe that it's necessary right now with this program to have public meetings to discuss why do we need to know where our aggregates are, because aggregates are not just for the resource it is, but aggregates at the surface represent groundwater recharge. They represent how we have clean water to survive into the future, and so when rainwater falls in, it goes through the surface aggregates and then gets into the groundwater system, and so we want to be able to identify where those areas are and try and minimize environmental impacts. Don't put industries on top of aggregate resources that potentially could contaminate the groundwater going into the future. So we want to seek data, request priority areas from all the departments, and that's what I've done for the last almost 8 years that I've been doing this aggregate focus. So here's just a quick summary of the actual org chart that we have, and we report to the minerals group in this program. And so myself as director, I have Heather Pekovic, who's the chair of the Department of Geology at Western Michigan University. We also have mapping specialists on the MGS side, and you have Nate Erber, who is a graduate of Western, but he has a PhD in geomorphology. John Ash, who's retired from the state after 39 years, and he's now working for us because he is an expert. He did mapping in Michigan for the last 25 years that we're doing it. And then we have a person up in the UP, Ashley Quigley, who's familiar with the Precambrian. Here's the positions that we're filling right now. And so the other thing that we're looking at is hiring a number of temporary students, because we're going to have field work and other things to go on. And so this allows students to learn more about geology and to get a job in the future. So we advertise, we get people. For example, right now I have 28 students working for me on one project. And so that means that they're making somewhere between $16 and $19 an hour working on a project doing data entry. This is some of the things that we'll be doing, but we'll also be doing field work. So as was shared by the archaeology group, Michigan's glacial geology is complicated, it's discontinuous, and it's one of the things that makes it such an important factor to understand here in Michigan, is that from 200,000 to less than 10,000 years ago, we had ice forming across Michigan itself. And so we had ice coming in from Canada from different directions, and that's what makes it complicated. Also, we have these terms called glacial moraines, and it's a geologic term, but a moraine means that it's heavily clay. Doesn't have a lot of material in it that's worth a lot of things. And so those are the mapping features that we want to map. Those are the ones that we would exclude, but there are the other ones that have the sand and gravel, and I'll be talking a little bit about those. One of the things that we've tried to do is, I've met with, as I said, for the last 8 years, is that We've prioritized with Eagle, as well as Eagle MPART, because the PFAS issue was the one that helped drive a lot of the mapping that we were doing right now in areas of critical. But also, I've been meeting with the United Tribes of Michigan for the last 9 years. I've been here 10 years, and I started meeting with them first year. We just met with them on October 5th up in Lantz, and at that, the tribal nations, I presented an overview of what the Michigan Geologic Survey is doing, and this program is one of the things that we review with them, so that we are informing them on an annual basis right now, and I see us doing that more frequently now that we're going to be doing projects to talk to the tribal nations. What counties are most important? These were identified by the Eagle Department of Water Division, but MPART, as well as the Aggregate Association, and we had about 25 counties that were important, and that's what we have. And so one of the things is we have 83 counties in the state, and right now we've completed 7 of them. And so that's been done over the last 25 years. It took us that long to do 7 counties. What we're trying to do is we're trying to expedite that with our annual funding, and this program using the aggregate mapping is going to help us to expedite that even further. So we reach out to Eagle, DNR, MDARD, MDOT, aggregate industry, and the public. We talk to all of them right now when we're on site and when we're doing things. What we want to do is be able to open this up to public meetings and other things as we start looking and going out in the field with our vehicles, because we're going to be, I'll show you how we're going to collect auger samples. So where do we begin? This thing, there we go. This is a map that you can get on GeoWebface, and it's a map that was developed in 1915. That's when this base map was developed by Leverett and Taylor. It was updated in 1955 by Helen Martin, and then in 1982 it was updated again by Farron and Bell. Essentially, all these features stayed the same. All they did was change colors on the map. And this means that there wasn't a lot of understanding of what was in the subsurface from 1915 to present. And so that's really what we're trying to focus on. So the role of the survey is to provide updated mapping in priority areas. That map I'm saying don't use, because we're going to have new maps coming up and they'll be locally oriented. So mapping done to date. So if we look at, there was federal money available in 1992, and that was matching funds, dollar for dollar. Illinois, the state of Illinois, looked at priority areas of where they had industrial growth and population growth, and they mapped in those areas, and they received almost $5 million from the federal government, and that was a match. Indiana received 4.2, and again, priority areas, Indianapolis as well as the St. Joseph River, as well as high agricultural areas in the north. Ohio had a little bit different. They had funding coming from minerals and other things. Even though it was a small amount, it was enough to keep them mapping continuously. They mapped almost 80% of their state in what we call a very sufficient manner. Now they're going in where they have issues with groundwater, karst, and other things in detail. And this is kind of the program that we want to do with ourselves right now, is to map in that kind of detail now that we have funding. Michigan, at the time, they only received $1.7 million. That was because they did not have any staff or anything else to put in for the one-to-one cost share. And so they only did limited mapping. And when I show the map right here, that's the area so that they could drive out and back from Lansing in a day. That was what it was, because they didn't have any travel budget or anything else to do the mapping. Later on, we started using geologists from Western Michigan University, and that was, again, travel out and just a local day. The rest of the state has not been mapped. Mapping is priority, and it's driven by our annual funding right now today. Michigan Geologic Survey has put together a long-range plan to USGS, and also presenting it to you right now is that on the left-hand side here we have the status map. These again are those rectangles that I showed on the other map. These are areas where we don't have any geology and where we have old maps back from the 70s and so forth that didn't reflect anything. This is a map that reflects our input from MDART, aggregate, as well as the Water Division. And the Water Division, high-capacity wells, this is where they don't have an understanding of what the groundwater system is in a state. We've proposed priority areas, and that's this mapping over here of the counties that, from that particular survey that we've done over the last 3 years, and this is what we want to continue to do. So one thing that's really important is outreach, and that means verifying the availability of contacts that we know, also public meetings to review the program goals and objectives, compile surface aggregate geologic maps identifying the location of the aggregates themselves, and then technical outreach. We want to work with MDOT as well as the state agencies, the Aggregate Association, mining companies, road builders, geologists, engineers, and the citizens as well as far as what we're doing. Public meetings. We want to make sure that we have the legislature involved with all of us when we're doing this, because we all need to be embodied in this, because we really need to know where the aggregates are. As I said earlier, is that it's where they are, but it's also to help protect our groundwater, protect our water resources, but also to provide a resource so that we don't build over it. And that's what we've had happen in a lot of towns, is that they've actually migrated and built over the top of good aggregate resources that could be used. So explain the process, and then the products will support groundwater recharge. This is a conceptual map, just a very quick one that just shows the different things that we have. We have ice up here on the top, and then we have moraines. This is a clay material, and when the ice melts, the water flows down and separates the sand and gravel and actually makes what we call alluvium. That's the loose sand and gravel that we want to find in the particular features that we want to map. And there's also additional features that may occur in this lower map right down here, where we have cames, which are part of a geologic feature, but it's a sand feature. And so we're looking at all those things that have potential sand features, and how do we see them? Well, one of the ways that we use is a feature called LIDAR, but I'm going to talk about it in a minute. Here's our inventory of main data sets, where they're at. We have inventories of the past, and these are inventories that the survey has, but also MDOT has them, DNR, as well as the U.S. Geological Survey. LIDAR, light detection and ranging, and this is a mapping program that 6 years ago the state was probably only about 40% complete. It's now nearly 95% complete with LIDAR, and I'll show you what the benefits are. WellLogic water well logs. This is the drilling logs for Michigan. I'm going to just summarize that, but it's a program that we started correcting the logs. Also the soil survey, SURGO, and this is looking at the soils in a certain area, which tells us what the potential soils are and what the subsurface material may be in those areas that we want to test. Then we have literature, we have aerial photos. We'll have environmental borings, and that's from Eagle. That's from the sites that they have, and I'll go through that. Then we have our boots on the ground, and that's when we go out and we actually field test what it is that we're seeing. So we collect all this data, put it into an iPad so that we have things that we can look at on a computer, and we go out in the field and we can see things. And you can have two people working 2 miles apart. When somebody puts a dot on a map, the other person sees what the dot is and what you have. And that's what the new technologies allowed us to do, is to have a better understanding of what it is. We want to get the information from all the stakeholders. This is MDOT as well as the agencies, county road commissions, to talk to them, consultants, commissions, the Aggregate Association, aggregate companies, Michigan Road Builders Association, and as well as the Geological and Engineering community. And these are professional meetings that I've been attending. So this is light detection and ranging. This is LIDAR. What it does is that this takes an image, and then you can actually look down to centimeters of distance and elevation. Aerial photos never did that, and what it allows us to do, and look at the top right over here, is that these are sand dunes that show up, but you wouldn't see those on a topo map. You don't even see them on aerial photos. This allows us to go out and actually confirm that they are sand dunes. This right here, this is an esker. An esker is a river that was traveling underneath the ice, and so this has sand and gravel with it, and I'll show you some examples where it has not shown up on a topographic map or an aerial photo, but we can see it here, because even though it's 6-7 feet of relief, which can have a significant amount of aggregate, it never showed up before. Then we have pitted outwash plain, which is a type of material that has sand and gravel in it, and then this is outwash in this area right here. So here's an example right here of a topographic map, and here is the actual esker right here. We do not see that, and this actually has sand and gravel resources on it. And so this would then focus us to go take a look at it and verify what it is. And then we have what's called LIDAR shaded relief. We can look at the elevation. So we can look at highs versus lows so that you can see what it is and whether or not there's topographic relief on it and whether or not there's potential impact of erosion or anything else that may be associated with it. We put all these pictures together, and that's part of what we put into our maps. Here's another example of the LIDAR right here. Here's the topographic map, and then here's the esker that actually comes right down through the valley. That's right here. It doesn't even show up because it's not high enough, because this is actually 10-meter, 30-foot elevation difference on the topo map, so you wouldn't see it if it's 6-10 feet. It just doesn't show up. And so this allows us to do a lot of surveys very quickly in the office, and so that we then go out and do field validation. Ultimately, what we do then is we publish a map of what it is, and you can see the roads on this, shows all the roads and ditches and everything, that LIDAR does for us. And so the other thing that we have is the soil survey, and that's SURGO. And this is looking at the soils across the state and what we have. And when we look at this, the SURGO survey will tell us whether we have sand or clay at the surface. And that's what we want to find out, because if there's sandy material, that gives a potential of having sand in the subsurface. So Surgo does not identify the eskers and the kames, those straight line things that I showed you before. They don't show up because Surgo just looks like the flat surface. It doesn't look at these little relief things that we have. And so we need to complement the Surgo map with the LiDAR data that we're collecting, so we combine those two things together in what we're doing. So right here, this is a map of Clinton County, and this shows right here where there's aggregate operations of any kind, and it just so happens they correspond with the sandy material that you have right here on this map on the top left. So these things right here correspond to this. So they tie together. Surgo sells one story, and then the actual aggregate operations, old ones, are there. One of the things that's important for us is that we need to have data. And a lot of the data is from the environmental sites. These are the 201 environmental sites where you have a geologist, geological engineer collecting sites. And so we have over 30,000 of these sites in Michigan, and so this is the data that we'll be compiling at the same time in different geographic areas so that we then know geologically what the boring says was in that area. And so then we have the underground storage tanks. Most of these are only 15 to 20 feet, whereas the contaminated sites can be deeper, but we want to find out what's in that top zone, and that's what these are going to be, and so we'll be compiling that data. The other thing I just want to reflect on is that up until 2 years ago, there really wasn't a database. In the state right now, the Water Division is looking at compiling the data now so that it can be used by everybody. And so it's one of the recommendations that I made about 5, 6 years ago. The state's moving forward with it. They did get a funding program to do it. And so they're pulling together the data off these sites now, not just us as a survey, but everybody can have access to the data in different geographic areas. And so they can look at it if they want to. So I condone and really praise the Eagle Division of Water putting this together. So it's going to be a very positive program for all of us. We're going to be compiling all kinds of data. This is a bedrock topography. This is maps that we have of data. And then the other thing that I just want to briefly go over is that well logic is the water wells. Does anybody know how many water wells we have in the state? You got it. And what we found out was back in 2018 when they were chasing PFAS around Kent County from Wolverine, was that when they wanted to go out and look for the wells were not where they were supposed to be. They were anywhere from 1 mile to 6 miles off from location. And so we received a small grant from Eagle at the time to go ahead and validate those wells to show where they could be corrected. 40% of the wells in Well Logic were not in the right section. So that meant they could be 1,500 to a mile off. That meant that you didn't know where the next water well was or down gradient. We are now correcting those. This is a program I have 28 students working on, and they're correcting it. We have a valid program we're doing right now. They can work virtually, so they don't have to be in a lab or anything else. We now have almost 80% of the project completed, and I'm just going to show just 2 maps, is that we have, these are the wells right here that we've corrected the location. Of the 560,000, we have 473,000 corrected for location. There's 700,000 wells that were paper logs that were collected that were pre-2003 back to the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. We are inputting all the data off of that and putting it in, and all these heavy green boxes are the counties that we finished. And so we've looked at priority areas anytime anybody has it, and so these are the ones we're working on. We have a budget right now so that we're completing this prior to December of 2025, and so we should have all that done. So all the water wells are now going to be corrected, and all the data that's available will be available for everybody. Because those 700,000 logs that were in paper, you had to go look for them in a file yourself and look up each one. We're now making it available for the public, and so everybody has access to that data. This is just showing the percentage of errors that we have, and the dark red ones are in the 50-60% wells, not even in the proper location. And so there's just, it's scattered as far as what it was. We are now correcting it, so we're making that all good. This is a rendering from Gladwin County. Remember the dam break that happened in Gladwin County a couple years ago? Water level dropped tremendously, and so there were a lot of people that were impacted. We as MGS then input all the water well logs in that particular area to identify those people that had a potential impact and how far out did that impact go. This is just a 3D rendering of what we did, and so in this we can see that in the green we have clayey material up here, and the green is clay on the subsurface. This was to try and tell people where we had water and where we didn't have water. And then, of course, if you weren't aware, there were about 195 wells that were impacted when the Tittabawassee Dam broke. Only 100 of them were permitted. All the other ones had landscape people go ahead and put a sand point in because the water table was at 10 feet. They could go ahead and put a well in. The people that had permitted wells, FEMA replaced their wells. Those that did not had to pay for it. So that's a plus and a minus, but this is what happened was that there was a tremendous number of people that were impacted. And now because they're waiting to rebuild the dams, that water table is going to stay down, so they have to put wells in those particular areas. So the other thing that we're doing is that this is inputting the data. And so this is an example of Ottawa County that we have. And so this was in 2021 before we started inputting the data. After we put all the wells in, we went from 11,000 wells in the county to 22,000. This gave us much more or many more data points that we could use in our mapping program. And so that's what we're talking about here. And so the blues on here are all those that are are current. These are the ones that were recent wells that were drilled. And then the red ones are all the older wells that we then put in. These are the ones that were not in there before. The other thing that's important is that we have PFAS out there, and it's one of the things that we want to make sure that we're addressing in all the program we're doing with this aggregate mapping as well as the other, is to look at giving the subsurface geology so that we can understand what the subsurface geology is in contaminated areas. This is an example of what we're doing now, and this is a very generalized map, but what we try and do is that we look at the top 15 feet. We can take all those water wells and say, only tell us what the top 15 feet looks like, and that's what we did. And so what we have here is that this shows us where we've got clay. The blue says that there's high clay at the near surface, and clay tells us no water is going to infiltrate in that area. The yellow tells us that there's sand at the surface. That means that that's where we need to protect it and look at where we're looking at potential recharge in the area. And so this is a way that we're at least putting the data together. Allegan County is a map that we just completed in the last year, and then we published this through the USGS. It's now open file. But on this, we're looking at, we plot where the sand and gravel operations are in the database. And so that's what we've done on completed maps. We can do that. And so when we had limited staff, and this map started over 2 years ago before we hired the staff that we have now. So now we're able to get this done in a much more rapid fashion to put all this together. This is some of the other map products that we have. Oh my goodness, sorry. This is other map products. When we publish our map, we also look at what the water table is in the county, and so we try and provide that so you have it. We look at shaded relief, which tells you where the relief is, highs and lows. Then we have drift thickness. That's the glacial till. What's the thickness? And you can see in this right here, see these colors right here? These are lows. This means that it's much lower in that area, and we call them bedrock valleys. Those are potential water resources that we need to look at, and so that's the mapping we have. And then this shows the bedrock topography, and this is all the data points that we have for topography. This is an example of our field work. This is our iPads that we have in the field, but then we also auger. We go down and we do hand augers. We go ahead and do a lithology right here. That's what we look at. We put that into our iPad, and that way that data is there into a table so that we have it, and anybody else that's working in the area can have it too. So that way we have constant updates on whatever we're doing. And then this produces a map so that when we put the data in and we put polygons or lines on it, that shows up immediately so that everybody has access to it. So the aggregate inventory, this is just one of the examples here, the aggregate inventory. We're just looking at how we can go ahead and put this on, and so we use GIS data to identify where it's at, and those maps are then available for anybody else to use. So example of Calhoun County, and this is a map that we have here, and I'm going to have Peter hold this up. This, I wanted to at least print something out, but this is work that we did, and again, we only had people working 1 month out of the year on this because we had contractors. This is before we had staff. So this is 2015 to 17. The map on the left is when we were actually going out and looking at the geology, looking at the features, looking at LiDAR and everything else. And so this is what we had. And then the colors that we have here, the grays and the yellows, are the sand and gravels that are at the surface. So that's what we saw when we did this. This is then the composite that was done in 2017 when we did the geology. And these features right here, these kettles and tunnel valleys that we have, are on this map, but they also correspond to the sands and other things. So those surface features that showed up on LiDAR, we put it on a map, then we can identify where those sand and gravel potential is located. And so this is one of the map products that we have, and this, I just printed these out larger so that you could see an example of this from this slide that you have. So summary of the aggregate deliverables. Once the data is compiled, we'll begin field verification of data, and that's using the data generated or compiled, and it's noted above. Then data be presented on a countywide format so that it can be available to the public as soon as we have it done. And so we're mapping with it with the geologists, but you and the public will also have the data as well, so that we want to make sure that it's out there within a month or so after we get done in the field and we validate it. The data presented to countywide data formats examples for the citizens and engineers, and we will then publicize and announce it. It'll be on our website, so we have it. The databases will be out there, the maps will be there, and then we'll publish the detailed county maps afterwards with everything on it, but you'll have all the data where the surface aggregates are located. For computers, we're using GIS. That's Geo Information Systems, and so we have layers that we can provide so that people can look at it, they can look at things in more detail. So we'll have the simple version in PDF, but we'll also have the details that people can look at. We'll prepare data summaries in a format that can easily assessed by phones and computers. And as we get more data, we'll add to it so that it's a living database. So as we get more data, it can go into the database, and that's what we've been doing in all the maps we completed today. And we'll also get feedback from everybody. So just a quick summary on the last year. We're hiring staff right now. We've contacted all the data stakeholders, and that's the state, county, townships. We're talking to universities as well as bibliographies in the public. We're contacting the state departments and the legislature. You here now letting you know what we're doing. Develop standard mapping products that meet MGS, USGS, because our map products will meet the USGS standards so that when we get done, we can go ahead and publish it and we get credit from USGS for what we've done. We'll have regional public meetings, which we are very much want to encourage being done. All public meetings will be MGS aggregate team will proceed to the field. We'll do verification and collection and validation of data. The other thing that we're doing is all these samples need to be stored at a core repository, and that's our core repository in Kalamazoo, which is full. And so we are looking right now because we had estimates of what it was going to cost just a year and a half ago, and those estimates went up from $6 million to almost $8.5 million to replace our core repository because we need to collect and hold more samples. All the drilling that we're doing with this program right here will do, as well as our mapping, needs a place to store it. And so we're still looking for additional funds for that. We want to determine, and we're using drone and geophysical surveys. And the archaeological people, we have GPR that we're using as well. And so we want to make sure that everybody's aware, and I think the archaeologist left, is that we have GPR systems at WMU that are also available to use, and we'll be using them on our program as well. We also want to test drones so that we don't have to walk every bit of it, but where we can go ahead and fly drones and adequately test for what the boundary is for the sands and the clays. We want to be able to do that. And then, of course, we want to contact MDOT because that's not a part of this, is that there are certain sands and gravels that are not suitable for concrete. They're not suitable for any other use other than perhaps road base. We want to make sure that that testing is done and MDOT does it, but they fund it so that it comes from their funding mechanism. This is for mapping only, but we want to encourage them to go ahead and help fund that testing that we'll do. So with that, I'm sorry I took a long time, but hopefully you have some questions.
Thank you for your incredibly informative presentation. Do we have questions? Representative McKinney.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you guys for being here in your presentation. Just wanted to give you guys, appreciate your acknowledgement of Eagle and how they're working together with you guys. And being the co-chair of the Eagle budget, it's good to hear that other departments are really, working together. So, but in terms of what you highlighted in the presentation, I know this is just year one, right? Yes. But how did you mention how long would this process take to?
I did not.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering.
Okay. I put the numbers together on this, and we are looking at somewhere between 3.5 to 5 years, depending on the complexity of the area. We have 6 people that we're going to be working full-time. We have some others that are going to be working on it, too. The aggregate mapping, the 83 counties, could probably be done about 4 years, 4.5 years. But what we want to do is to make sure that we tie the maps together. So I see it as a full 5 years. We'll be giving updates to DNR as well as to the legislature right now as far as what we're doing. But I see the first program now is starting to get the data. We'll be able to show you more data than we have in priority areas. And then, yes, there are remote areas of the state, but there's also remote areas that have a tremendous aggregate potential that we really want to know. So 3.5 to 5 years.
Perfect. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I have a comment and a question. So one of the wonderful things about your presentation, John, that makes me feel really good about the resources that we are devoting to you after so many decades of your being underfunded is that the partners that you have that you mention. So as technology has improved, you know, and we have the ability to accumulate data and bring it all together. Your role in this is just so critical because we have all these requirements, right? We have requirements for what people do when they drill a well. We know that that information is really important, and for over 100 years, we've required that the well drillers save that data and report it. But you haven't been funded to take that information and collate it. So I'm really excited at the kind of intersection of all these different pieces of information that we know it's really important to collect, and we require through our laws and statutes that people collect this information, but then you're creating something that all the departments and the public are going to be able to utilize all that information, which the taxpayers are paying for. So you talked about Eagle, you talked about well drilling for drinking water, you talked about work that you need to do when you have contamination. And of course, if we have all this information, then the work hunting and finding where the contamination is going will be a lot easier if we know what the substrates are. One thing you did not talk about that I would like you to tell us about is, can you give us an example, in looking at, let's say, economic development, can you give us an example how the public or a private company or people who have, own their own land or, can you tell us how the public could use this information and what might result from it that could be an important economic development driver?
Excellent question. Let me just give a 3-sentence background. I worked for a national home builder that worked in Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, as well as the Carolinas. And in Arizona, for example, in the greater Phoenix area, what was happening there is that there was tremendous growth in the greater Phoenix area and growing out, and what they were doing is they were building houses over the top of the gravels in that particular area. The mapping, this is 10, 12 years ago that I was doing this. And so what we determined, and what was determined was we needed to know where the aggregates are, because if those aggregates had high value, that meant once you built over it, you couldn't do it. And so when I started making presentations here about 7, 8 years ago to the county planners and other township people, their concern was the same, is that if we have development growing over the sand and gravel, we can't use it. And so if that is now taken out of our ability to use it, how much does it cost to go ahead and bring gravel in for our streets, roads, and other things? And right now, it's 20 to 25 miles, and with gas prices going up like they are right now, is that it could be even less, but the price doubles when you have to transport it more than 20 miles. That's not very far. And so what we found out, going back to my land development days, is that they would go ahead and mine the aggregate out of it first, and then rather than having a dry land open area, they put ponds on it because it was shallow groundwater. So all of a sudden the value of the property went from, say, $100 a foot to $400 a foot for the same property because they had lakefront property. And so the lake was just there because the groundwater is shallow. We have some of those areas that can be the same way, and there's an example up in Jamestown in Ottawa County. They're doing the same thing where they mine the aggregate, taking it out, and now they're putting houses on it, and it has a lake. So the real issue is that we don't want to build over the top, and so we want all the county planners, township, as well as everybody else to know where the aggregates are so that you can slow development down if you want to use it. If you don't want to use it, you have another resource that can replace that one. And by this mapping, we'll be able to tell you whether or not you have an alternate replacement for that. So I'm hoping I answered, because we're trying to get that information so it's public knowledge for everybody, so that you're not going to build over the top of something that has economic value. And the last thing that I remember is most budgets are a finite budget when they get them. So if all of a sudden they find out that they don't have aggregate that they can use, if they had $1 million and it doubles the price on it, you just reduce the cost of the budget project, which means you do less with the same amount of money, because it costs more for transportation of transporting the aggregates.
Thank you very much for that helpful addition. I also was thinking about the deposits that were discovered, not related to aggregates, but geologic mapping, the deposit that was discovered of potash in Michigan that is really going to be a useful resource for all of our crop needs, and in fact crop needs all over the world, really. So thank you very much. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. So Representative Martis moves where there are no, why do I do this every week? There's no absent members. I'm really proud of you guys for showing up every week. There being no business before our committee, the committee will stand adjourned.